And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right. I said welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you wanted to come back for more. And I don't blame you. I mean, this is a fantastic podcast. We have fantastic guests and we have more for you. So I'm really glad you came back. This is the podcast that is about podcasters. It's for podcasters and it's done by podcasters. And my guest today, you guessed it, you cracked the code, is a podcaster. That's correct. Before we introduce him, let me just say thank you to everybody out there. This is the place where we try to come together and raise each other up. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. And that's what we strive for. That's what we work for. And that's what we are succeeding in doing thanks to all of you. So thank you very much for your likes, your shares, your subscribes, everything else that you're doing, and all the DMs on all of our wonderful podcasters that we have on here. Folks, if you are a podcaster and have not been on my show yet, well, why not? All you have to do is contact me. Let's get you on there. All right. Let me get to my guest today. This guy's amazing. He's got so much stuff going on. The more I read about this gentleman, the more I could not wait to interview him. Please welcome podcaster, host of the podcast that is coming back bigger, better, and stronger than ever. Coffee with a Podcaster. Please welcome Matthew Bliss. Matt, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Rory. It's great to be part of the nation.
Thanks, appreciate that. And I didn't get to say this to you in the pre-interview, Matt, but I will be drinking this coffee through the entire episode. So if you've got a drink, don't stand on ceremony, man. All right. There you
As we
go.
know, good podcasters are well hydrated, so we need to make sure that, yeah, we're doing all the right things.
100%. Absolutely. If I wasn't drinking my coffee, I don't think anybody would know it was me at this point. So I have people send me like ideas for coffee cups with the Podcaster Nation on them and, the whole nine yards. So apparently coffee's my thing just with what I do. So got to keep it going, man.
Same here.
Now, your podcast. Let's talk about this right out of the gate. Coffee with a
Mhm.
podcaster. Tell me what the story is with that. It's coming back.
Yeah, so I've been in and out of podcasts for a long time since I started doing all of this stuff in 2020. And it didn't take me long to figure out that there's kind of a weird thing with the podcasting podcast. Like it makes sense for someone who's offering services to people about podcast editing or coaching or setting up or, helping people get going, that you should probably, do what you preach, right? You should probably have a podcast. But the podcasting podcast has a few foibles with it in the system that we can talk about a bit, maybe later. But the the idea of having a podcast about podcasting that was different to everything else that I'd heard or seen, like most podcasting podcasts are leveled at people who are getting into it, just getting started, and are looking for that easy, optimized entry point into creating their own show. So I wanted to take a different angle with the podcasting podcast, and it took me a little while to figure out what that actually is. I feel like I've landed on what it is now. Previously, the episodes were very short monologues from me about subjects that took my interest. And a lot of the more curious aspects of the industry are what took my interest. And really the stuff that people don't usually see or hear about in the general podcasting populace. Like I'm sure Sounds Profitable has come up at some point in your conversations. And if not, brand new. Um, there are a couple of blokes, Tom Webster and I forget the other bloke's name now. He's going to hate me for that. But anyway, they do a lot of around advertising in podcasts. But a lot of the advertising is the way that podcasts get monetized and podcasters get paid. So invariably, the data that they acquire is important for engagement and retention of audiences in the industry. So while on the face of it, the independent podcaster probably isn't looking at their content because they're focused on the business of podcasting. They share a lot of data that's really important for things like video podcasting on YouTube versus audio and RSS. What's the deal there? And what are people reporting about the things related to those two aspects of podcasting or not, as the case may be? And how does that impact the way that we approach building our podcasts? So I'll do a little 10 to 15-minute monologue on, the stats that they've reported in one of their reports that I think would be really useful and that I was interested in. And wanted to, chew the meat off a little bit. But I found that it was really hard to come to the microphone as a monologue without a general goal, the only goal being to like unload my brain. So anyone listening to this now will go to Coffee with a Podcaster and see 16 to 17 bonus episodes that will give you a demo of, what those episodes were like. But they're bonus because I'm coming back with a bit more of a focused mission structure framework and something that aligns closer to how I want to run my services out of mbpod.com and how I want to contribute to the podcasting world in general.
Beautiful. Okay. You mentioned mbpod.com. Great segue. Let's talk about what you do there. So mbpod.com it's your website. And what type of thing do you offer through that?
So that's the main portal for my services. It's where I've tried to make a bit of a home for my business. And playing around with my name for a website has often been hard. I figure keeping it simple makes a lot of sense. And I started offering podcasting services probably at the end of 2022. I didn't have the website then, but being able to offer editing services to podcasters was important to me at that stage. And again, mentioned on the pre-call that I sound Australian, but I'm actually living in Ireland. Big move, but podcast editing as a side hustle back in Australia allowed me to have something to keep things financially going here while I was looking for a job. And I haven't managed to find a job yet that was appropriate to my skills that, again, we might talk about later. But yeah, so that's kept me going. And that's when the website came about. So I'm currently pivoting my offering too. You've caught me at a really good inflection point where people can get on the ground floor if they hear what I'm all about here. But previously, it was podcast editing that was my main offering that came out of that website. And there's a strong portfolio there of podcasts that I've contributed to already and continue to. So if people are curious to see what my work has been like, I think it's relatively chronological from bottom to top. But it's a good web page to bookmark if what I'm talking about sounds good, and you'd be curious to explore what I'm doing later on.
That's awesome. All right, we'll definitely be checking that out and talking about that some more. I'm curious. I mean, you seem like a relatively young guy. You were talking about finding a job and doing this full time. And what brings you into the podcasting world? How do you end up getting here?
So there's usually another P that you talk about with podcasting and entering into that world. It's the pandemic. That was the the common refrain for most podcasters
Right.
that we have today. But I've always been a technology guy who's been focused on getting the most out of the equipment that I have and, being able to explore and deep dive on things that made sense. Media was one aspect of that. So I had a background in 2020 of, learning tools, helping students in IT in the secondary system. Sorry, not sure how many audience members we have. Let's say year 7 to 12, middle or high school for the Americans. I don't know. But yeah,
Usually,
being
yeah.
IT support there, it covered a huge range of aspects of technology that I was familiar with, knew a little bit about, and was able to, leverage myself. And having listened to podcasts for 8 to 10 years prior to that point in the pandemic, when everybody had the time and was at home and could grab a Blue Yeti and get started on making their own content, it was just a bit of a deep dive for me to figure out how to solve all the problems. And when I talk about problems, I mean why do I sound terrible? Why don't I sound like I think I sound when I'm talking on the microphone, being all eloquent and delivering all that fantastic information? So 2020 was the start of that for podcasting for me. Figure out how to tune up the audio, EQ compression, all that stuff. For editing, not constructing or rebuilding an entire interview from the material that someone gives you. Like what that might be one of the secrets to becoming a great podcast editor is that if you start in really, really hard mode. Everything else seems easy. But that first interview I recorded was literally me like reassembling pieces of Lego into a completely different image. And it was so time consuming and annoying and hard. It's just not worth it, which is why most podcasts that we get into today have great hosts who set themselves up to ask the right questions in the right order so that you don't have to do something like that. We're not all journalists and from the New York Times and stuff like that. So yeah, 2020 started doing podcasts for myself. Uh, Deep dove on all the aspects to fine tune it and make it perfect. And then around 2022, people started asking me questions about it, and I started to think, well, why don't I just start offering it to people? And it was a side hustle while I was working in state government in Australia as a uh, it's this is the bit that's really hard to describe. For pandemic, like I started as an IT trainer, but invariably with being in Melbourne, being one of the most locked down cities and states in the world, I think it was well over 250 days total. It meant that I had to trickle into other things. So not just IT training. I had to pivot to remote delivery of that training. I had to figure out how teams can be productive from home, working remotely together. I had to support and help manage a Microsoft Teams rollout for a department that is remotely located across the entire state, 5 to 7,000 people at any one time in those 5 years that we were 3 years that we were covering during the pandemic. So, IT training, pivoting into all this stuff, other stuff required for it. This was just a side hustle at the time. Like I was busy enough. I didn't need or have room for more stuff to try and earn a bunch of money. But my wife, being Irish, she wanted to come home and start teaching in Ireland again because she's a teacher. So, yeah, we decided to make the move. We made that move in the middle of 2023. And I set myself, as I said before, to the task of finding a job. And I brought some clients with me from Australia at the time so I could keep the finances rolling through. And yeah, this is just where I've ended up, really. So it has been difficult. It's a very short couple of sentences to say, and I brought podcasting here, and now I'm a huge success, which is absolutely not the case in podcasting. Anyone who offers podcast services knows that's not usually what happens. But to have something there that I can kind of sink my teeth into, and not only that, be able to offer, well, maybe 80% of my time while I was looking for a job on the side to just continue getting better and improving and connecting with people and making networks across the planet. Like it's hard, but being able to work from like essentially 3, 4 different time zones, if you include both the sides of America, you connect with a lot of people. So podcasting has really just given back to me that way. But now I'm in a place where a lot of the improvement isn't happening in the editing space, and you learn enough that you're able to offer more things like coaching, like consulting, like strategy, like creating a podcast that delivers a ton of value to people for free in the podcasting industry that's a bit different. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now. It was the move halfway across the world that made me go into it 100%, but it's turned into something really great.
It sounds like it. And you came at it from a position that I don't normally get to hear about, to be honest with you. Most folks, when they come on here, editing is the thing that would push them out of the business. So,
That was the opportunity, right?
right.
Like I thought I've been through the fires of Hades and I've come out the other side with a tan and here to offer, you know, you don't like this. I also don't like it, but I'm good at it. So why don't I do it for you?
I also don't like it. Right. Exactly. Nobody likes it. Just some people are good at it. No,
That's
I
right.
mean, that's a great way to look at your job, your life opportunity is see a need, fill a need, So I love that you
Mhm.
stepped in and filled that up. The move from Australia to Ireland, that had to be a little shocking. Had you ever left Australia before?
Yes.
Oh,
So
you
my
had?
wife and I had been together for at the time. This is the bit where I get, why don't you remember the years? Um, but we've had a lot of milestones in the in between, so it's bit difficult to remember. We've been together since 2012, and usually every couple of years we fly back to Ireland for Christmas or for a couple of weeks to visit, and then go back. So I have seen Ireland a lot before I made the move over here, and I was relatively familiar with it. And all of my wife's family is here. So we had that expat experience of being able to stay at someone's house, not worry about accommodation, kind of slowly creep into getting all of the things sorted, like the bank accounts and finding a place to live. And for her, she got a job before we left Australia, actually. So that was another thing that made it easy for me to kind of just find where I fit into the whole thing and figure things out. But funnily enough, one of the things that you probably may not have found is that we have a podcast about that as well. From My Home to Yours is a podcast we did up until September 2023. And we recorded episodes before we left Australia. We have kind of a special episode with voice recordings and one of those sound design projects I took upon myself to try and cut together. And some of us being on the plane and then landing over here. So if people are curious about that story, then they can check out that podcast as well.
Now, why did you end up canceling that one? You just decided, hey, the journey's over. We're here now, so that's it, and you stopped the podcast.
No, the truth is, we started running out of things to talk about a bit. And when I say to talk about, it's not like we got sick of talking to each other. It's that with the expat journey into Ireland, at least, the first 18 months tend to be the hardest. This is us looking back on it on reflection.
Sure.
At the time, we had the preparation, the mental preparation, like the logistical stuff of moving from Australia. We had a property over there that we were looking to rent out. We were trying to condense a household of stuff into a storage box and put it somewhere. We were trying to get ready for what I would need, being, a brand new resident in the country. We were trying to sort out insurance, taxes, voting rights in Australia, because this is one of the things that blows people's minds. You have to vote in Australia, and so you have to register. Yep. So not in Ireland, not in America, but Australia, you are required to vote in council, state, and federal elections. It's not an option, which comes with its own interesting set of circumstances that maybe
Wow.
you look very curious. Would you like to ask anything about that?
I don't want to interrupt your flow, but I mean, the first thing in my mind is because, I'm American. So the first thing in my mind is, you're required to vote or what?
You get fined.
It's a fine to not vote.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Okay.
I think they call it radical democracy in most things. The irony being that it's hard to get people to vote in a country where you're not required to, but generally you get the people who are invested into the vote to submit what they want. So most of that effort is trying to get people on board, then into the booth to do the thing. In Australia, you have the same problem, but on an inverse axis. So people who don't care are also required to vote. So you may have an inordinate, swing of votes in a direction depending on how things went on the day. And you walk into a polling center in Australia and you've got a line of people who will just hand you pamphlets with the instructions of how to vote for their party leader or their, party or whatever. Make the instructions as simple as possible. But it's also the place where the donkey vote has become quite popular. Like you go in, get given the sheet, write turd sandwich on the top of the ballot sheet, fill in nothing else, and then submit it. And they don't know. Like it's not tracked. It's still a very anonymous system, but you've done your civic duty. You've rolled up to the polling booth. You've bought a sausage and bread before you get to submit whatever it is you're going to submit. You don't have to do anything necessarily. You just chuck it in.
Well,
So you can have just as many disengaged voters when you're required to vote as you would in a system where you're not. It's kind
Right.
of a weird parallel. And if people want to explore, depending on when this comes out, there was just an Australian federal election at the time of recording. This is in May 2025. And you might be keen to explore how that election went. It was very even most of the way. And you see a lot of parties that are popular, that get talked about a lot. They tend to be the ones that float to the surface and gather maybe like 70 to 80% of the votes and the seats just because people know who they are and they get a lot of airtime to talk about what they want to. So, yeah, it's
All
interesting.
right. We could go down that rabbit hole forever. So we probably
Yeah,
should get back over here to podcasting. But that was, I appreciate
for
you
sure.
taking that quick aside because I couldn't even control my face, I guess, because I was like, wait, you have to vote? I've never heard that before. So, but
Yep.
anyway. So I am curious. So as you're getting all that ready, and that's why you're getting all that stuff together, you kind of run out of things to talk about on the podcast, not with each other, but on the podcast. So that's
Yeah.
why you guys put it on the shelf.
Yeah, we found that, you can talk about getting a car and organizing the insurance and getting your essentially social security number to do your taxes, becoming a resident, finding the place to live, trying to find where the things are that you want. Eventually you get to a point where you've figured all that stuff out and you're not really making any changes. You're not filling in any forms anymore. You're just you just have to sit and live the life, you know?
Yeah.
And that's the point we got to. So we didn't want to put pressure on the podcast being the thing that was at the center of the world for us. It was our move and getting used to being here. So that's why we stopped it. But we have had requests of even last week, we had people asking, when are we going to hear the rest of the story? Like we've been through every episode. We need to know, like, how's it gone? Are you back in Australia? What's happened? So there might be some episodes coming shortly.
I was going to say, so are you going to come back and do just a finale, maybe a wrap up, you know, 5 episode
Yeah.
to close it out? This is the end of the story. This is where we are, and now on to the next story. Come check out my new podcast.
Well, I think every expat knows that the story never ends. So we'll
There you
come back and definitely give an update. But whether that's the end of our Irish migration story remains to be seen. But hopefully
It's
that's adequate enough a teaser for people who are interested to hear
there
it.
you go. Right, I like it. It's funny because over the last, I want to say maybe 3 to 4 weeks, I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of folks who have used the expression expats in terms of of what they're doing. One of the questions that I love to ask them, and I do want to get back to your production and podcasting over here, but if you don't mind,
Mhm.
one more little tangent here. I'm curious
Of course.
because to an American, Australia, Ireland. I mean, wow, seems like a very different setup from climate to I don't know perception to looks like behavior maybe to custom. What have you found was a huge difference between Australia and Ireland in terms of living there?
Um, well, the shortest answer would be everything, but it's the little things. It's the little things like the weather here being completely inverse to Australia. Here you'll have Storm Aowen, which went through, or Owen, that went through the west of Ireland recently. 140 kilometer per hour winds destroyed a lot of the electrical ecosystem, houses without power for 2 weeks. That's like a once in a 70-year kind of thing. And the conditions can get cold and rainy and wet. But in Australia, it seems like every 2 years you'll have a few days that get up to like 56, 52, 56 degrees Celsius, not Fahrenheit, Celsius. And bushfires will just ravage half of one side of the country and destroy lives, destroy homes. It seems like the temperature is just going higher and higher. And the pivot point there for me is that I hate hot weather. I'm from the country, but I dislike it intensely. So I'm very happy to come to a colder climate. That's zero issue for me. But the cost of living is very different here now. The Australian economy has gotten to an inflection point as well where things are getting too expensive. A, a flat white coffee, for example, might be 7 or 8 Australian dollars. which, to the Americans and the euro havers and the pound users, might just be like 3 or 4. But that's what it was to us like a few years ago. Groceries are going up, cost of living is growing up, housing is growing up. It's a common story across the world.
Right.
But when it's the country you've come from, like it makes a much more starker impact. And while Ireland has its own housing issues, the grocery and the produce is great, very easy to get to. Supermarkets make sense. And like I can live on a trying to figure out where his future is podcaster's wage in Ireland, where I couldn't do it in Australia. It would still be a side hustle for me. And part of the reason that I'm still a podcaster is that the job situation is different over here too, trying to apply for jobs. I've got a client actually who does taxes for people. She's got a expat focused podcast as well. She talks to everybody who's been through the system or knows about the system in Ireland to help people learn. And one person mentioned that applying for jobs, this person was an American, applying for jobs was hard. And then he found out a little while on that he was coming in with the usual American bluster, like, I can do whatever you need. Just, I've got it. This is all the reasons that you should pick me for the job. And that he wasn't getting that because the Irish are more humble. Like, if you come in going like, rah, 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 I'm your man, they're kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, sure, but, we prefer a little humility. At least this is a completely colloquial thing. But the fact that I applied for so many jobs that kind of fit in what is my background, which is like technology support, learning development, project management kind of stuff a little bit, helping people learn to learn from the teaching background that I've got, that doesn't really fit a niche here either.
Hmm.
Whereas in Australia, they're all about it. And even going back to my IT background, doing technology support in schools, it's not a job that exists here. So the job stuff, very different. It's a lot of little things that you pick up on as you go.
Like the way you said that, the usual American bluster. That's that's how you guys view us over there, huh?
This is a consequence. Leaning back to the podcasting again, this is a consequence of editing the content the way I do. I kind of absorb it in the way that it gets spoken. So sometimes it gets reiterated to other people the way I've heard it or had to hear it, like this time to clean it, and then this time and this time and this time. And so the usual American bluster is, I think, is how this person put it together. So I apologize for any Americans who who were offended, or you, Rory, were offended by that particular
Goodness, no.
categorization
No, no, no,
of the
no.
American idea.
Part of the usual American bluster is that we are proud of that. So that's a compliment to most of
Yeah,
us here. We really we don't get offended by that. So,
no, but it's really interesting. The podcast I'm talking about is Tax Bites for Expats. If people are interested for the US to Ireland context, which is
yeah.
becoming more important in this environment, Sean Carney and Jeremy Strozer are the two part one and part two episodes that you should listen to get that categorization. And Sean puts it really succinctly. He says that Americans, the American system is all about pushing upwards, achieving what you can, and getting what you can from the system. Because from the outside looking in, it's a system that's individualized. It's about, you know, freedom to do what you want, but it requires you to put in the work to be able to do that. And so you kind of have to, you know, bluster up, I guess, to try and get in there. Whereas in the Irish system, it's all about who you know, but it's in the way that, you know, my dad worked with someone whose brother has a friend in the place I want to work. So we float down the grapevine a little bit, have a coffee with someone, and then the opportunity becomes a little bit more tangible than it was if you went to LinkedIn, applied for the job, and said, I'm great, hire me. Like it's a little bit different. Admittedly,
Wow.
every system probably has the who you know as opposed to what you know kind of thing, but
Sure.
it just shows up as a little bit different.
Interesting. That's very interesting. I mean, we could probably again talk for an hour on all the differences between the
Yeah,
two
we need a
countries.
bonus episode or something.
Yeah, and I wasn't even thinking that until in the pre-interview you told me, hey, I'm Australian, but I live in Ireland. My mind kind of went, whoa, that's got to be tough, but I didn't get to say that then. So I said, well, we'll see if I can ask him about it during the podcast. So
Yeah, and this is the thing, like you're trying to get at like the emotional stuff as well, and I'm pretty bad at that for the most part. Like the 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 logistical, the economical, the all that stuff is the stuff that helps you build your life to figure out what and how you can do it. And I've usually been pretty adaptable with the way that I can come to a country. Like if it's a great country to be in, which Ireland definitely is. The emotional side, I've dealt with it incredibly well, but most of the reason for that, I think, is that I was in a 9 to 5 in Australia that was relatively toxic to a degree. I had a side hustle, so I was doing like 40 to 60 hours a week of work. Things cost a lot of money. We had a lot of pressure before the move to get things done 6 months before the move. And then we did the move, got it done, that pressure released, and I could settle into having the podcasting stuff. I was financially stable and I could kind of explore in the confines of this room that I'm in right now, kind of where I fit with things. So it hasn't been a sharp emotional shock, mostly because pivoting to podcasting as a career has meant that it's like a completely new environment, new things to learn, and I'm in a new country, new things to learn, like completely blank slate on almost everything. The comparison, like it's the thief of joy. It's also the bane of one's existence when you're thinking of what you miss from where you were. And we often talk about it just as an aside on the weekend or something. Is there anything you miss, Matt, from being in Australia? And I'm like, no, I don't think so.
I
So
mean,
it's,
that's
yeah,
great.
that's the lack of emotional response from me on that front. But
Got
it
it.
explains it hopefully and is part of the reason why I'm still doing podcasting now. I think that like it enables me to have, you know, maybe the therapists listening are going, he's just kicking that can down the road. It's going to explode at some point. He's going to get a 9 to 5. And then all of a sudden, all that trauma is just going to emerge from somewhere. But it's working for me now. So we'll see how we go.
Well, I may find out. We have a lot of therapists who listen to this program, so they're
Oh,
not
okay.
shy about commenting. So
There you go.
we may find that out sooner rather than later. But it
Hmm.
sounds like your wife is very supportive of you exploring these options and doing this for a living right now, though, while you're waiting.
Yes. She's, I think she's mystified for the most part that, coming to a new country, you don't expect to etch out a career for yourself and do your own thing. And she remarks quite often to me that like it's amazing that you've come to a new country, new people, you know, completely new stuff all over the place, and you've built a business for yourself and you can live on that business. Like, she's got a reliable income. She's got that 9 to 5. She's a teacher. She's working her way to having that job for the next 20 years, which is hard to do as a teacher in Ireland. But like, there's security here. But she still is surprised that I have been able to do it myself. And again, it's that sharp shock, like being able to not find another job, be financially stable to explore the skills to be able to do what I do for people now is interesting. And I think for people doing any entrepreneurial venture, I think it's kind of like learning to drive a car, where most of your learning with someone supervising is maybe 10 to 20% of what you need as foundationally to get going, but you learn most of your driving skills on your own when you're in the
Yeah.
car on the road and you have the ability to fail, to try things, and without that chance to, you know, do all the things I've done in 2 years, which probably would have taken me like 5 or 10 if I kept doing it as a side hustle, it's become an easier value add and sell to be able to do it over here on my own. But yeah, she is supportive. She's been great for all the stuff. I mean, we've not had a reduced life because of what I'm doing, except that the content engine always keeps moving and everyone's got a podcast that you have to edit. And it's sometimes harder to take holidays if people have that content that needs to keep rolling. Hashtag YouTube lifestyle or whatever the kids are calling it these days. But we've had I've had disposable income to be able to spend and go on holidays. We can go on trips around Europe and go to hotels, even in Ireland, to explore things a little bit more. So yeah, not having to be disappointed by how little I earn and contribute to the household being removed means that I guess she's just mystified most of the time that I'm able to do this for myself with the circumstances we're in.
That's great. And it helps that you're successful at what you're doing. And you must be good at it because you took clients with you across the globe. So they must like you quite a bit to stick with you. So
Yeah, so, look, as with most things, some of them worked out, some of them didn't. Um, maybe that's a subject that I can talk about working for a non-profit, uh, which is always interesting when you're offering services to a business that's not focused on making money. But yeah, if I didn't have those clients with me at the time, I probably wouldn't be doing it now. So I was very thankful.
well, let's talk about the business. You are into editing, of course, which you've mentioned, and podcast production, and you have several
Hmm.
that you list on your website that you are producing, right?
Yep.
And then you just mentioned working with people and help. Is that helping to produce or helping to edit for someone who's a nonprofit?
So the nonprofit that I brought from Australia is the only one that I've done stuff for so far. And it was largely where the offering kind of grew because when you think of a podcast editor, they are the person that you give the assets of the recording to. They chop it together into an episode. You might go back and forth once or twice with a revision or two. Output the episode, they give it to the podcaster again and say, here you go, done. It's all good. But I'm one of those people who has an attitude of never being satisfied with one thing. And I always need to know how to do every single little thing. And I need to know how to do it well for myself. But it invariably means there's a bit of scope creep. And that's where it started with that not for profit. So, what started with editing episodes, rapidly became uploading them and taking the show notes from other contributors to people who created them and pumping them into the uploads. Great. And then you start to talk about the website and you start to talk about YouTube optimization. You start to talk about titling. You start to talk about how do we improve the quality of these recordings? Like, how do we, get all these things in place? How do we organize these people? And a lot of the podcasts that I've guested on recently have been talking about that not for profit because while there's a lot of opportunity there and the mission is great, the workflow essentially had to be like a corporate. It had to be set up
Hmm.
because we are remotely disparate, remotely placed individuals working together. So the communication has to be good. And it wasn't. So where the communication can't be good, the workflow has to be just spectacular. Chef's kiss. Nobody has to adjust anything. Like there's a 5% error rate that people have to jump in and change. So that became my massive focus for that not for profit was creating a process. And this is what I was built for from a very young age. Like see problem, fix technology, insert technology, create efficiency, have people communicate by accident, essentially. Make it as simple as possible that they can't not do it. And for maybe, I want to say 70 to 80 episodes, so about a year and a half, that the work with them was all workflow, but it also involved bringing on sponsorships, creating the main show as well as side projects based on those grant sponsorships. So they were doing episodes specifically for like connecting seniors together, giving them opportunities to meet more people and not just languish in the basement of, a senior care facility, or bushfires, like I talked about before. People sharing their stories from the 2019, 2020 bushfires that ravaged half of the state of Victoria, and being able to share that trauma with the public and with people who have similar stories. They were extra podcasts on top of the main podcast feed. So we had that. We had back and forths about making sure that the the recorded content was right. Massive rebrand, bring more people in to create new branding, which affects the assembly of the video episodes. So how do you finalize the branding, and then I bring it in and rejig the episode structure or whatever to make sure it suits that. And invariably, I took on a lot of it myself. Like I was podcast that, those network diagrams that you get
Oh yeah.
in complex IT setups where they just put a cloud and they say network or something. Like you presume all of the complicated things are happening in it, but it's like a Charlie Brown fighting dust cloud where you presume there's activity in there. I was that cloud for the
Okay.
podcast part. So that's where I learned, where I started to grow out into more than just the editing. It was helping people come to the microphone, set up their computer, create the optimum conditions for recording to be able to give me something excellent on the other side. Troubleshooting the technology, dealing with CRMs, creating guest templates, having templates for future editors of the content that I make so that the handing over when I invariably leave, which I soon will have, handing it over to other editors so that the content remains the same and they're able to create the same quality product that I did. Then on the other side, AI, figuring out how to take AI generated transcripts, move them into content that doesn't just sound like it's been spat out of the free version of ChatGPT, or helping people take transcripts and move them into content that makes sense. How to draw more engaging aspects of podcasts into what your client wants to do in a reasonable way that doesn't reduce their time, especially when they don't want to pay any more than they are. Like the straightaway example are the 3 minute intros that Diary of a CEO does, which has structured the video podcast intro for the entire industry. And Stephen Bartlett, I mean, he's great, but he talks about the three people who work for 72 hours straight trying to cut together this engaging intro that has popping text, sections of the episode dragged in, has footage from the interview, sliced together with footage of these people standing on stage and talking to people. It's how much information you include and you don't include. If people are fans of Diary of a CEO or Stephen Bartlett at all, whenever he talks about we had time to fail and test the small details that people miss, this is the stuff that he's talking about. Thumbnails, getting a good YouTube thumbnail and building it quickly and efficiently, but also packaging the contents well for YouTube so that it has some sort of algorithmic chance of getting picked up. All these things eventually arrive at more than podcast editing. You have
Right.
what I call the producer. After a few people kind of told me, you're not editing episodes anymore. You're a producer. You're producing them. And anyone who's currently offering services to people need to keep this in mind too, that you're offering way more than you should if you're doing all this stuff. And the reason I say that is because I make that mistake. I value I value my clients more than I value myself, which is great when you're getting paid a salary at a 9 to 5 for a corporate or a government institution, and you can just prostrate yourself to the 5,000 plus people in that system to give them what they need. And they're ever thankful because, you know, people will generally either be thankful or they'll pay you money and expect what you want. It's a very harsh dramatization of that relationship, but people are generally thankful when you do that in corporate. When you're doing it for yourself, and you can't scale your time well, it becomes harder and harder to do all those things without taking things back to the basics and starting to separate those into different products or selling your services differently. Now, that's a very complicated subject that I've kind of, shoved into one little box, and I can see your brain working away like which part do I pull out of this? But I guess in the journey, the not-for-profit asked for all those things, and I didn't adjust for that. I can now have a very efficient baseline offering for any client that I bring on board that has all these things kind of included or not. And so production, being a producer for me, means I can offer whatever a client wants, and it kind of becomes a very bespoke sort of service. So, we edit podcasts, Pod Machine, all those kinds of websites that say, we edit your podcasts for this much per month, sign up for episodes, whatever. That's not what I do. I very much get into what the client needs. Everything's kind of custom but efficient. Have I answered the question?
I believe
I'm a bit of a
so.
waffle guy.
You did a great job with the question. The look on my face and the stuff going through my head was that may be the most complete definition of podcast producing that I've ever heard from anybody. And I love
Hmm.
that because I've talked to people before about oh, I'm a podcast producer. And I'm like, in my mind, I go, okay, what do you do for the podcaster then that makes you a producer? And I was actually going to ask you that question just point blank if we didn't get there some other way, but you covered it totally. That's exactly what you do if you're a podcast producer. So it sounds like the goal is that if you were producing my podcast, for instance, my job is to
Mhm.
do what I do behind the mic and then hand it off.
Yeah. At the maximum level, like, yeah, that's what I can do. But the reason it's a bespoke service though is that, and I'm starting to get more aggressive with this with any clients that come in, that I like to leave room for vision, you know, like understanding that a podcast isn't like it's a medium, it's a channel. If you're thinking of it from a business perspective, like it's a place where you share your message. And now we have places where a podcast turns into social media content, blogs, social posts, reels, medium form YouTube content, whatever. It can be anything. But the vision is important. If someone has an idea of what their podcast should look like in their mind, I want to get at that. I want to extract that from what they know, and at the same time not wrestle away the things that they want to keep control of. That I have that like just gives me recording, or I'm present during the recording to go. I'll have another client who like goes for how the episode should be structured. There might be that they do the thumbnail, but I upload the content. It might be that they make the show notes, but not, like it, there could be back and forth, handing off different bits depending on how extensive the role needs to be. So, yeah, vision and achieving what someone wants to from a show. I like to prioritize very highly so that whatever needs to be done with the many arms and legs that me as a podcast producer can offer to do all the things, that's important. But unless you're involved, I can't help you build your vision unless you're not in it for creating a podcast as we understand it to be. You just want another marketing channel for your business. And then it's just cutting an episode together and putting it out and seeing what happens. In which
Sure,
case, we kind of get what we get. You get a great product, but if it doesn't meet what you expect, then that's when that discussion hasn't happened.
sure. I love the definition. I love everything you've described to people. So I mean, I think you've put out there very, very well what it is you do and what you offer. So I appreciate you cutting through the gray area for everybody on that. I always ask a corny question as we kind of go, and so I think I probably should get that one in there. But as you do what you do, and this is going to be interesting
Sure.
because I know what the I know what the second part of the answer usually is, and I don't think it's going to be that way with you. What is uh, what's the part about doing what you do that you love the most, and what's the part that you do with what you do that you hate the most?
Um, what do I love the most? I love being able to solve problems. Um, Therapists, hope you're still listening, but external validation has always been super important. And I think that helps me drive a lot of value for the clients that I have. But not just the validation, but knowing that the product is great. But if someone comes to me and says, "Ooh, I loved Jay Klaus's last podcast episode. I saw that." And he has a way that he structures the side by side during the interview, remote interviews, where it's kind of like on a curved like box square with a shadow with a backdrop. Like, can we do that? And I'm like, leave it with me, and I'll see if I can figure that out. Invariably, I do. And then the puzzle becomes doing the thing. How hard or easy is it to do the thing? Can I template the thing? And can I build that template into the workflow to make it as efficient as possible to be able to deliver for the customer? Then I can do it for everybody. Then I do it for everybody and the problem's solved. And maybe that's the bit that I hate, that there's no novelty anymore. And that isn't always the case because, as anyone who has edited a podcast with a wide range of guests would know, Rory, that sound quality, recording environment, cameras, output format, all of these things can be very different. So I've had cases where I've had to stitch together broken, unrendered squadcast recordings, which, for the technical among us, get output as WebM files for the video and the audio, which can't be subsumed into DaVinci Resolve, probably Premiere, maybe, but they're mobile optimized web files. So I have to convert those. And because they record the video at 48,000 hertz and the sample rate is 44.1 for the audio, you have to resync as you edit the entire conversation for one side of the conversation where the other side is rendered just fine. That's a big problem, but
Wow,
it's also novelty. And when you don't have to do those things and you just sit there cutting the episode together, it becomes, I've used the word pedestrian quite a lot recently, but it becomes quite pedestrian. There's not a lot of challenge in it. So yeah, it's the thing that I love is solving the problems and finding something new. The things that I hate, not being able to challenge myself, I guess, which is an awful recipe for a successful entrepreneur. Like, stop looking for the things that are hard and just operationalize and make more efficient the things that make you money so you can do those things later.
in theory,
But
yeah.
we're at the pivot point. I think I said it before, Rory, that this is like the transition zone for me, bringing my podcast back in and changing what I offer as part of my services to try and activate those things without having to spend 60 hours a week doing podcast edits just to make ends meet. So yeah.
Love it. I didn't know what your answer would be, but I knew that it wouldn't be what I usually hear. So, I mean, if this was Family Feud, top five answers on the board, number one answer is the thing I hate the most, editing. I mean,
Yep.
and the number two answer, very close, promoting. But editing,
Yeah.
always at the top. It's crazy.
I
So I
feel
didn't,
like because you
yeah.
haven't asked me yet, and because production is my thing, had a very broad answer for it. I just want to get out there somewhere, which I will on my own podcast, that I deprioritize socials incredibly. I don't think as a podcaster, I mean they are important, but they're important because it's the way that you get people in front of your show. But I think we're in an economy at the moment where promoting has become socials, and socials has become Opus.ai. It's become Riverside's magic clips. It's about the technology. It's not about the approach. And people kill themselves doing what they love with a podcast episode and then spending, as you said, all that time on the promoting. And I think it adds like a 5 to 10% bump on what is otherwise the value of a podcast. Like Stephen Bartlett's 3 minute intros. Great. You can spend tens of thousands of dollars per episode on building an engaging intro that captures a YouTube audience. But then you've got 3 hours and 10 minutes of conversation that has to back that up. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But suffice to say, I think the most important thing that people should focus on is their podcast. That is soapbox picking up and moving to the other side of the room. Please proceed with the remainder of the episode.
Oh, I like that. You know what? With everything you've given me today, you feel free to be on that soapbox just a little bit. I think you're okay.
Sure.
So I understand. And thanks for that answer. Wow. I mean, you've given everybody a whole lot. We're all looking forward to seeing Coffee with a Podcaster come back and get a little listen to that and hear you doing your thing, behind the podcasting mic. So, did you give me that earlier, the release date on that? Do you have an idea?
There's no release date yet.
Okay.
Actually, secretly, and the theme should be things I forgot to tell you before the interview started. I'm actually working with some people out of the UK at the moment, Rob Drummond and Peter Daly Dixon, on a project called Activate Your Podcast, which is designed to help coaches and artists and people looking to begin a podcast to walk in for a 2 hour long conversation, and we craft 5 foundational episodes for that person to get their podcast started that explains who they are, what they're about, what they're offering, what the show is, and all in, 10 to 20 minute episodes that people can put into an email sequence or, create social reels, which are great. Um, uh,
Right.
but yeah, so the short story there is that uh, they've been kind enough to help me build that out. Like I'm the podcast editing guy, and they're the conversation people. So they've extracted the conversation from me, and it remains with me to edit the first 5 foundational episodes of Coffee with a Podcaster together and create what the opening foray of YouTube content is going to be related around that. So anyone who's subscribed now and sees just those 18 bonus episodes will hopefully in the next month see 5 introductory episodes where you hear from me about my love of philosophy and the idea of Socratic dialogue, how I love delivering value to people before I can grab it for myself. There's a lot of story there. I won't tease too much, but you know. And if you're interested about Activate Your Podcast as well, which again, Rory, you've got a bad poker tell there. Activateyourpodcast.com is where you can find that stuff out, or you can get in touch with me, and I'd be happy to help you out too.
What's my bad poker tell?
Your curious face, I see it a lot. I must admit I didn't check if this podcast is on YouTube, but if it is, people will know that there's a hmm,
Hmm.
hmm.
Well, I
It's a
appreciate you
good
letting me
tell for
know that.
podcasting. Seeing the curiosity, that's always the thing that keeps us going, right?
Well, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, I don't try to hide any of that. So,
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite things about podcasting and doing what I do is that I get to hear very interesting, fascinating, frankly, things from my guests as I'm sitting here listening to stuff. So, keeps me young, which is tough to do because I'm getting a little long in the tooth, man. I'm not a young guy like you anymore. So,
Uh, Not young anymore. I think I'm getting there. I've got the grays coming through in the beard, and I envy yourself, which I'm not going to ask what age you are. I'm just going to presume you're in one of those transitional stages where you just look great for like 20 or 30 years. So
I
we can only
appreciate that
aspire to
very
be
much.
like you, Rory.
Oh, listen to this. Listen to you're already on the show. You don't have to butter me up now.
Got to
All
keep coming
right.
back for the second one
Yeah, I
about
appreciate
voting.
which we could talk about for a long time. Yeah. All
That's right.
right. Listen, I appreciate you giving us all the time you have for sure. And I mean, hey, you do this for a living, like I do. So it's refreshing to talk to somebody else who does that. And but I also understand that your time is money. So I want to make sure we, get the most bang for your buck here too. As we kind
Mhm.
of, pull things together, wrap things up. What's one piece of advice for podcasters that are out there? Maybe they're not as, accomplished as you are in the field. Um, you work with a lot of podcasters as you go. Um, what's one thing you can kind of leave behind for the folks who are listening to this show right now?
Um, I'm going to give it to you in two parts. Prologue. If you ask the internet a question, unless it's a great question, you're probably not going to get the answer you want. But if your first question as well, when you start a podcast, is what's the best microphone for me, then we're starting in the wrong place. Now, that's not to say that the equipment isn't important, because I see a very polarized advice giving on the internet, Facebook's, Reddit's, wherever it might be, that there is your get the equipment right, get it perfect and amazing sounding, and then you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the life of your show. Or there's the just do it on your phone, do it in public on a windy day, with dogs around and stuff. Doesn't matter. It's about what you build into the podcast content, the way you structure your episodes, be consistent, release every week. Those are the two sides that people will often drift to. There's an intermediary stage where the questions you should be asking yourself isn't the best microphone to get. It's also not how many times should I release my episode weekly. It's what do I have to say? What am I curious about? What's the direction for the show? What is sustainable for me? I think I said the question before. It's clearly questions, but let's just put them in a question box. What's sustainable for me? What is a workflow that I can deal with? And at the end of 6 months, 6 months, what can I look back on to see if I did well? That isn't download numbers, and figure out where I want to go to next. It's a combination of these things all together that you have to think about. And part of the reason that I say all these questions, and already I'm sure the person listening to this right now who's looking to start a podcast is going, oh, but that sounds like a lot of work. A podcast is a lot of work. Whether you go minimal effort, but have to stay for that 6 months and endure through every 5 minutes that you refresh the downloads in your first few episodes to see how many people love your content. All of that stuff is hard. And it has to be hard until it gets easy. And it gets easy when you find what you love. Doing all those things at the very beginning is really helpful. When you run into a problem, like distributing the podcast to Apple Podcasts, which is notoriously difficult, even though they've made it easier, it's still difficult. Uh, that's a question for the internet or Google. But if you say, I have an idea for a podcast, it's going to be about anime. I like Chainsaw Man. Uh, what do you guys think? That's not going to tell you anything that you want to know. It's about introspection, reflection, workflows, understanding yourself, and then understanding what you're going to love about doing your podcast. And for the business people, what's going to get you the most for your business out of doing the podcast. Um, I think I probably lost that game. I think that was probably like 12 tips rolled into one. Uh, so maybe the one piece of advice is go to mbpod.com and send me an email. I don't know.
I love the awareness to use that as self-promotion. I mean, hey, why not? It's what you
Yeah.
do, right? So I
If
love it.
there's an
That's beautiful.
audio sounding dab, let's do that.
There you go. That's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. And I love the advice. I really do. I love the way you structured that out. So I think people are taking a lot of different things away from what you just gave them. So it's going to be interesting to hear comments and things like that when this comes out. So, but I
Great.
appreciate Matthew. I appreciate everything you've given us today. I really do. And people don't get to hear about this a whole lot because people offer podcast producing services and things like that, but they very rarely describe them, talk about the benefits, talk about what they really are, how they work, and things like that. So I think you've probably given a lot of really good knowledge to podcasters today who didn't quite know how this all worked, and I appreciate you for that. Thank you for doing that.
If I can change someone's life and make the staring down the Facebook barrel and remove the 4 months of research they do to make this thing easier. And even if they're thinking, I hate editing, I'd love to find someone who can help me do that. Even if it's not me, then I'll be happy.
Excellent. Excellent. Matthew Bliss, check him out at mbpod.com. All his services are there. People he's worked with are there. The guy is legit. You are the real deal, sir. And I really do appreciate you
Thank you.
coming on. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Rory. It was really fun.
Thanks. Folks, this has been another episode of the Podcaster Nation. This is the place that's for podcasters. It's about podcasters and it's done by podcasters. This really, really is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing.